Hi, I'm Daphne and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you all the books that I read in fall 2020. So since this video is probably really long, I'm gonna be putting all the bookmarks and timestamps down below of the books that I'm gonna be talking about in this video so you can jump around however you want. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to see more videos from me. You can also push the bell icon if you want to be notified every time that I post, because I don't post super frequently or regularly yet. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me here at Daphne Ginn. Now let's get into the video. So I read a total of 13 books this month, and I'm going to go through them in the order that I read them. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Q-Teen 84. It ended up taking me about 2 months to complete this book, which is over 1,000 pages. It's like 1,150 pages. So I got this book maybe like 5-6 years ago at this point. My boyfriend picked up a copy. He wanted to read it. He wanted me to read it with him. And we both had been struggling to read this book forever. But because it was like what I considered a failure for not finishing it, I just felt like it was defeating me. So it was like really personal for me to finish this book. So I did. I started over and I finished it in about a little over 2 months. The story is a bit more of like a mystery. There's a little bit of love in it. The two main characters are like star-crossed lovers, I guess. I don't know what the definition of that is, but they've basically been holding torches for each other since childhood. They had like a small interaction together, and then throughout their whole adulthood, they've been holding torches for each other, like being like, this is the love of my life, but I won't try to find them. If it'll happen type of mentality. And then there's a lot about a strange magical cult and some strange magical little creatures and a mysterious young girl and being transported into a different universe dimension. So I ended up giving this book 2 stars. And I said in my review, mostly happy to have finished this book after trying to read it for the last 5 to 6 years. A lot of the mystery was never answered, and the book is way too long and unnecessary detail that does not add to the plot. Yeah, I still stand by that. I mean, the story has so much detail, and it's interesting at times. Like, it's a decently entertaining ride, but like for me, who doesn't read a lot of mystery, to have like nothing answered was like, why did we go through all the trouble, you know? So I can't necessarily recommend this book, but I'm just so happy that I finished it. So that was an accomplishment in itself. So the next book that I read was A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore. This is the second book to Bringing Down the Duke. It's not with the same characters or anything. It's with like side characters from the first book. I wanted to get this because I really enjoyed Bringing Down the Duke. It was a fun ride. It was steamy. It was romantic. It was interesting. This book didn't do that as well, in my opinion. I mean, people gave this book still pretty good reviews. I personally gave it 3 stars. So the plot of this one is that there's this lady Lucy who's a women's suffragist in England in like the 1700s, or sorry if that's not the right years, who has known this Lord Ballantine for most of her life. He's kind of a player, and their romantic story. The main like plot device that was pushing them together was that Lucy wanted to own a printing press, but Ballantine, also known as Tristan, bought it before she could, so he had most of the shares for it, and he was like, oh, if you sleep with me, like, I'll give you the rest of the shares, or like the owning number of shares. But like, that didn't make any sense for what happened in the story. Like, it was kind of a lame plot device that didn't do anything relevant. It was just like, oh, this sounds interesting, and it just didn't make sense. And also, it wasn't as steamy. I didn't get any butterflies. I didn't blush. It just didn't do it for me. I don't know if it was like the frame of mind I was in at the time. I think there might be another book coming out in this series, so I'll give it another try because I did like the first one, and I think the author has the skill to make a good, fun romance. But this one, the plot just didn't make sense, and it wasn't that steamy or romantic. I hope these reviews are good enough. I mean, I'm not really telling you what the book is about. Whatever. So at the time, after I finished reading it, the review that I wrote on Goodreads said, enjoyed the first book more, felt confused by some of the plot points, disliked that some of the descriptions were too vague so the imagery was lost or confusing, same for the characters' thoughts, had steam but was less steamy than I had hoped after reading Bringing Down the Duke. The third book that I read this fall, also in September, was Head Over Heels, which is another romance story. This is about a gymnast named Avery and a male gymnast, Ryan. Avery was an Olympic potential star, but she got injured and her dreams kind of crashed and burned, unfortunately, and it's her story of trying to rebuild herself, her love for the sport. The guy, Ryan, is someone she was in the gymnastic circles with a lot, and he's starting a program to bring up young gymnasts who are Olympic prospects, and he recruits Avery to help him coach them and their romantic potential and story. This one was actually really fun. I gave this 4 stars. It was really interesting to learn more about the gymnastics world. Interestingly enough, when this was written, it was for the 2020 Olympics, so it's supposed to take place around that, but obviously due to COVID, the Olympics didn't happen. The author does mention that in the beginning, that, you know, a lot of real life people who spend so much of their life training for the Olympics, who, you know, who were gonna go through the Olympic trials to represent their country, you know, all that work almost feels like it was wasted because the Olympics got canceled. And you never know if someone will get injured or if something comes up, or maybe they're too old by the time the next Olympics gets scheduled, and how maybe the 2020 Olympics was somebody's last chance, and the harsh reality of that. And this book also talks about just the harsh realities of abusive coaches and abusive relationships and the mistreatment of young women in gymnastics by creepy guys who just do horrible things, and the scandals that can come of that, and like Me Too movement type topics. So when I first read the book and I wrote my review, this is what I said. I'm just reading these because this is more fresh thoughts versus like my trying to remember since I read this a while ago. But I said, really fun read. I enjoyed learning more about the world of gymnastics, and overall as a book, the plot, the conflicts, and the dialogue just made sense. Also, the wrongs done to these characters, I truly felt for them. Yeah, that was definitely a strong point in the book. I feel like sometimes in books, the thoughts and the actions of the characters, they do things just to push the story forward. But I felt in this, it just made realistic sense. Like if someone was struggling with something or struggling how to make a decision, I could really relate or like empathize with them because they were realistic and the thoughts they had were realistic, and it just didn't feel forced or fictional. It felt like a true conflict, not like this like, oh, we need to like stir the pot so that the book is interesting. And I appreciated that a lot in the story. And it's short. It's just a little over 300 pages, and I mean the font's pretty big, so it's an easy, quick read. I probably read it in a couple days. How many days did it take me to read that? Yeah, I read that book in 2 days. So the next book that I read is another romance. Clearly I have a trend in my reading style. So this is Well Played. This is the second book to Well Met, which I actually really enjoyed, which took place on a Renaissance fair. But it's not the same characters. This is another, like the other book, a side character who gets her own story. So the plot for this is that there's this woman who's friends with the girl in the first book. Her name is Stacy. She works at the Renaissance Fair as well. She's been having kind of a difficult time getting her life on track where she wants it to be. Her mother has had some health problems, so she's been staying at home. She's like mid-20s, and she feels a little lost in life. She loves the Renaissance Fair, she loves her friends and stuff, but she just feels like she's trapped in her hometown. One of the guys that travels the Renaissance Fairs, he's like a musician in a band, and she hooks up with him throughout the years or whatever, but he's kind of a player, so it's nothing serious. But she texts him one summer and she starts to feel she has a real connection with him online, and it really surprises her. But to more of her surprise, she finds out that the guy she thought she was texting isn't actually him, and that it's somebody else. So she's getting catfished a little bit, or a lot of it. She's just getting catfished. And then the story of her and the person she's actually talking to. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars, and my reason for that is I felt the main female lead was very stagnant in her life, which was true, and over the course of the story did not organically grow into the person she wanted to be. Yeah, I felt like that was a little rushed at the end, like it just like, oh, like, I don't know. It felt like she just changed at the end for the sake of the plot. Also, the male lead was not very likable and was too easily forgiven for catfishing her and lying multiple times. Yeah, so lying is not cool. He's like the main lead character when you find out who he is. He's not like horrible, but I feel like he definitely was forgiven too easily for all the lying. Besides just the catfishing, there's some more to that, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I just felt like the conflicts in this story were too conveniently like wrapped up, just like, oh, okay, you know, and didn't feel as real as in the other book that I mentioned, Head Over Heels, where all the things felt realistically, believably, you know, resolved and overcome and things like that. And this girl was really struggling in life, and then things just like, whoop, we're fine. But like in Head Over Heels, the girl was also really, really struggling in her life, but you could organically see her overcome those things. Or in this, it didn't feel as organic or realistic, or like she worked hard for it. It just kind of like fell from the sky, like, okay. I'd say the steam in these books by Jen DeLuca, the first one had like some good steamy moments. It's not like just all of that. It's just like a touch here and there. This one had less and was less fun than the first one as well. So far in my reading journey, I hadn't been doing so great. I only read one book that I really liked. So the next 2 books that I'm going to talk about, I actually did a reading vlog on, and I'm going to link it up here for you if you want to watch in more detail. But for now, I'm just going to give you a super quick overview of it and my thoughts. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Black Kids, which is a young adult book. So this is the story of a high school senior living in LA in the 90s, back when there were protests going on about the mistreatment of a black man by the police. I read this in the height of like the 2020 Black Lives Matter resurgence. I thought it was really important to read more content like this. I do have another book that I desperately need to read, but it's really, really dense, like nonfiction Black History in America book, which I'll talk about at some point. Let me just show you now, actually. This book is on my TBR list. I desperately need to read this. I want to kind of read it more slowly and like take notes on it, but it's called Stamped from the Beginning, the Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. I actually follow him on Instagram now. He posts a lot of really informative information. I picked this up before 2020, actually. I picked this up around last Christmas just because I saw it and I was like, wow, like that's something I don't know enough about and that I need to educate myself on and like open my eyes to the reality of what's going on versus just my little safe bubble that I feel safe in. Whereas, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have that confidence, but honestly, I go into it more in the vlog when it's more fresh and stuff, but with all the Black Lives Matter stuff that was going on this year and seeing the people who are against Black Lives Matter and who are so hateful and like the fear that created in me, I just felt really scared and lost and confused my identity and not safe anymore, but then also fortunate that I'm not like living in the craziness of it like some of the characters in this book. If you want to know more of my detailed thoughts on it, definitely watch the vlog that I linked in the corner. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think it's a really good introduction for young people on these types of topics. I personally don't love young adult. I feel like this could have gone more serious and darker and like grittier than it did. But overall, a good story and a good thing to see different perspectives of if you don't live this way. Also, actually, another thing that I really liked about this book was that the main girl, obviously she's black, but she lives in like a mostly white neighborhood. Her family is pretty well off. So she's, in a sense, similar to me, where I feel like I didn't grow up in the black community, and this girl didn't grow up in the black community either, but she's getting exposed to it through some of the scholarship kids that go to her like elite high school and their different experience with the riots and, you know, living in a less safe neighborhood because the police are terrorizing them and things like that, and her learning more, similar to how lately I've been trying to learn more. I would recommend this, especially to teenagers. And then the second book I read in that vlog was Anxious People by Frederick Backman. This is my favorite book of the entire year. Love this book. I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did. I got this from Book of the Month. I was like, let me just try something different. Let me not get another romance book. Let's just give this a shot. And it became my favorite book of 2020. And I'm so happy I read it. So the synopsis of this book is that there is a bank robber. It takes place in Sweden. Sweden, okay. Okay, so this is a Swedish book translated to English. So the plot of the story is that there is a bank robber who failed to rob a bank and tries to escape by running into an apartment building and stumbles into an apartment showing with a few people in there and accidentally turns the situation into a hostage situation and the comedy that ensues. So this book isn't like a thriller or anything. It's mostly like funny. It's supposed to be funny, but it's also mostly about people and connections and relationships and the complexity of individuals and how they relate to the world and other people in the world. It's a beautiful story. I loved it. I mean, it's definitely a bit of a mystery too, because it goes from a lot of perspectives. It goes from these two police officers' perspective and trying to figure out this hostage situation and interviewing the people that were in the hostage situation. And as the reader, you're like trying to figure out what is happening, who's who, what are these random like things the author is saying, like, oh, this isn't a story about a hostage situation, this is a story about a rabbit, and then no, this is a story about a bridge, and no, this is a story about, and you're like, what? And you're just trying to go through this journey with the narrator. And the narrator is such a big character in the story. It's written from third-person perspective, but the narrator is like the star of the story sometimes, because he just makes fun of these characters so much. He makes fun, I don't know, he just kind of like he just calls all the characters stupid, and then he just kind of ends up making you feel stupid, and you're just like, how did you trick me into feeling so stupid? You got me, like things like that. It was just such a fun ride. I actually recommended this to my mom, and then she recommended it to her book club, and they seemed to enjoy it. So I'm glad more people got to appreciate this book. Again, if you want to hear more of my detailed thoughts on this, definitely watch that vlog. Highly recommend, 5 stars. Oh, I'm getting exhausted from doing this. I have so many more books to get through. Oh, this is what happens when you read 13 books. The next one I'm going to talk about is The One to Watch. This one was fun. It took me a little bit of time to warm up to it. This is about a beauty fashion blogger, plus size blogger, who criticizes like the Bachelor franchise. It's not called The Bachelor in this, I forget what they call it, but for not having inclusive people in it, like body types and things like that. So they want to bring her onto the show and mix it up. And it's just her journey with all the male contestants, how some of them are really fake and jerks and really shallow, and how they judge her for being plus size, and some of the guys that were really genuine and who actually were starting to fall in love with her and cared for her, and her trying to navigate that and to make a decision on who she wants to end up with, and even if she needs to end up with somebody, you know. This was really fun because I do watch the Bachelor franchise, so it was kind of cool to see like what the potential behind the scenes of a show like that would be. There's also a bunch of like clippings of like articles and stuff in here, and like group DMs on like friends or fans who watch the show and their opinions on what's going on. I'd recommend this. So the main character's name is Bia, and the show's name is Main Squeeze. It was a fun ride. I read it in like 2 days, and I was literally stressing about this book. I just remember the first day I was reading it, I was like reading it for hours, and then it was getting late, so I had to go to bed, but like I was just so anxious about this poor woman Bia, and I was like, are these men in it for the right reasons? Like I was really stressed. I like couldn't sleep that night, so I just had to pick it up again the next day and finish it because I was just like really anxious for her. I was like, oh my god, this poor woman, like I really want her to find love. I hope these guys aren't being fake, and it really gets you invested once you get past like the early bits of it. So I gave this book 4 stars. I said it started out slow, but literally had me on an emotional roller coaster rooting for Bia. Literally couldn't sleep, stressing over if her suitors, quote, were there for the right reasons, end quote, LOL. That's what I wrote. So another book that I read this fall was The Space Between Worlds. This is a sci-fi book. I really like the sci-fi aspects of this book. So basically it is about this technology that has been created for people to jump between alternative universes where they already exist. So like the catch is that you can visit other worlds as long as the version of you on that world has died. So the main character in this book, her name is, what is her name? Kara. Kara has died on like 98% of the worlds that they have access to, which is like 180 or something worlds. And she does like these resource missions and like pulls data on how the other planets are going. But there's some corruption going on in the organization that she works for. And she jumps to a universe where one of her alternate personalities has been supposedly murdered. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but the universe jumping was really interesting, seeing how the people around her that she cared about or despised differed on the different worlds she would visit. There's romantic interest in this between her and another woman, which I thought was interesting, but I'm just very hetero apparently, and like I'm rooting for her to be happy, but like it doesn't excite me as much. And plus like the romance was like tiny, whereas like she has like an ex-boyfriend that was like abusive to her, but like in one of the universes he was like kind of nice, and then I start getting excited. I'm like, oh! And I just had to laugh at myself because like, man, I'm just so hetero. Like she doesn't want to be with this guy at all, whether he's on another world and he's nice to her, like, but like my hetero heart was like, oh, maybe it could work out now that he's like not horrible, because he's like a different version of himself. He's like a totally different person who's like nice. But like, no, she didn't want that. And I was like, oh man, okay, we'll go back to the girl she actually wants. The main issue I had with this book was that I found the ending kind of confusing and like stupid. I'm not gonna tell you, I want to read it again to be like, did I miss something? Like what? But I don't think I missed it. I just think the ending wasn't that strong, which was disappointing because I really liked this book, but the ending just knocked it down a peg for me. But I would still recommend it because it was actually really fun and it was actually interesting, and all the things that happen on, what do they call, like planet or like world universe 157, I think it was pretty cool. I still gave this book 4 stars. I wrote in my review 3.5 to 4 stars. The traversing is like the universe hopping aspect, was very interesting, and the world was very imaginative and believable. Ended with less of a bang than I anticipated, which was a little underwhelming, but I guess plot-wise it was okay. Really enjoyed the world. 175, sorry, that was dyslexic. Storyline. Hashtag good Nick, which is the ex-boyfriend. LOL. Also was impressed and enjoyed the diversity of people and identity in the book and how unrestricted gender was. For example, Exley and female runners being misters, etc. Also love that Niem, I don't know how to pronounce this name, but it's like the god of the traversing. Like the people that would traverse believed there was this god that allowed them to cross into the other universes, or like the scientists were like, that's not real, that's just like a side effect in your brain of like, you know, the difficulty of traversing. So I said also love the Niem aspect of the wonder-like feelings it gave me, the magic of traversing between the worlds. Yeah, that was really cool. I still recommend this book. It was really interesting. I might read it again. And like I said in the review, they had a lot of characters that were gender fluid. They had a lot of characters that could be like tough guys, but they were like females, and they were still respected as equals to their male counterparts in like their gangs or whatever. And there was a good diversity of races, like our main lead, even though they don't say it like up front in the beginning. It took like almost till the end until they like outrightly said the main character was black, but she's black. And then I believe her love interest is Asian. There was a lot of good diversity in different spectrums throughout the story, which I appreciated. Another book that I read this more recently in November, is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. There's a lot of hype around this book. It came out a couple years ago, but the third book had come out this past November. I have the second one now, but I haven't started it yet. I've actually put it under the Christmas tree. But this is The Poppy War. This is about like a Chinese-inspired fantasy world where there is magic, but the magic isn't super well known. And the main character, Rin, she is a war orphan who has been put into a family that is corrupt, like they're into selling opium drugs and things like that, and they want to marry her off to this unappealing man so they can make some money off of her. But she wants to get out of that, so she ends up studying to go to an elite school, but she has to be like at the top to get the scholarship for it. She ends up being able to get in. That's not a spoiler, this is really, really early in the story. And then her experience being in the school, her experience with the war that follows, that was inevitable between her country and the neighboring island country. They have a lot of history and hatred among the cultures, and her learning to be a shaman from one of her professors, which people don't really take seriously. They think it's all just like folklore, but there's true power in that. And her connection to the Phoenix god, who is quite dangerous and destructive, but very powerful, and she can kind of pull that power into herself at times. And it's a dark story because Rin doesn't always make the choice you want her to choose. And it's not because she's stupid or anything, she's just kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, and she just has a lot of hurt in her heart and doesn't always make decisions that you want her to make, and they're quite painful. You're like, no, please. Don't do that. But I'm excited to continue this series. I have the second one in the paperback version that matches this theme, so it's very colorful and blue. A lot of the other ones are just all white. But the third one just came out in hardback and it's white, and obviously hardback, so it's not gonna match. So I'm trying to wait until it comes out in paperback that will match my editions, because I really don't wanna have mismatching editions in this. I already have like this other series, The Rogue of One's Own. Its first one is in paperback, and it kind of annoys me that they don't match. And I didn't think I'd be this person that cares if things match, but I kind of care. But anyway, I ended up rating this 4 stars because I'm really stingy with 5 stars, but honestly, it's probably more like a 4.5, maybe even a 5. I didn't give it a 5 outright because, like I said, it is quite painful to read, and her decisions are kind of painful to accept. And I think I go more into that into my review. I wrote, overall enjoyed the story. However, from a personal perspective, I find it extra difficult to root for Rin, the main character, since living your life fueled by anger and rage, I know to be toxic and exhausting. So she does that, and it's just really, I just know I don't want that for her life, you know? I wrote, I do not wish that for her. Also, she makes bad decisions, which I get, but again, find hard to root for her because of. Also, the drug addiction aspect is heartbreaking. Yeah, so a lot of the shamans have to use poppy seeds or like drugs in general to connect to the gods, and they burn out really, really fast. Like, they can only last as these shamanistic warriors for so long because they just get addicted to drugs and just succumb to it, and it's just really, really sad. It's just sad. And then like the author, she studied a lot of the cultural history. She's Asian as well. So a lot of the war aspects are apparently based on real events, and they're just gruesome, horrible things. Definitely worth a read though. Very, very good, very, very well written. The author is young, a young girl. She's like in grad school or something. She's young. And that's amazing. What an accomplishment. So I'm excited to read the second one. I know it's gonna be hard. Also, I heard the third one is just as rough. There was a meme that I saw going around where it was like, some fantasy authors are like, come join me on this magical adventure. And then there's other authors like this woman who was like, I will destroy you, you know? So that's what this book is like. But it's very beautiful and well written and interesting, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna get the second one when I finished this one because, like I said, it was really hard to read. It's just like painful, but like I'm left being like, what is gonna happen to this girl? What is gonna happen to these other characters? I just kept thinking about it and I was like, I need to know. So I got the second one. Okay, I'm gonna talk about this one super, super quick. This one I got from Book of the Month. This is a romance. It's This Time Next Year. It's about two people whose lives kept intertwining without them knowing. They're born on the same day, on New Year's Day, but the male guy was born like a couple minutes before her and stole like the prize money. It takes place in England, and the woman is really struggling with her life. She's like in her early 30s. She doesn't have a steady job. She has to go back, live with her parents. She has these dreams to like help people with basically having like a charity food truck type vibe, which is cool, good for her, you know, that's great. And this well-off guy, she feels like he stole all her luck in life. He even stole her name, which was, what's the name? Quinn. Her mother her mother wanted to name her Quinn, but this guy was born before her, made the papers and stuff, and his mother ended up naming him Quinn. And you learn in the story that like their mothers were in the hospital together, and her mom told his mom that she wanted to name her Quinn, and then she ends up stealing the name, and all the fucking drama that comes and the reveals that come of that. And she just feels like she's very unlucky. Her name is also Minnie, but her last name is Cooper. Her parents named her Minnie Cooper, which is just more like shit she has to deal with in her life. Honestly, I did not like this book at all. It's a romance, but there's like no romance in it. Where the fuck is the romance? Okay, so I gave it 2 stars. There's a lot of time hopping in it, so like it goes back to like when they had crossed paths in their lives before, but like there's just no romance in this. I wrote, flat out did not enjoy, not fun or romantic at all. I didn't like that the main character was failing miserably at life for most of the book. Boring and painful to read. Love connection was not fleshed out and lame because of that. I liked Quinn, who's the guy. He felt real, but Minnie, the female lead, was two-dimensional. Their love story deserved better than the execution of this book. Yeah, it was pretty harsh, but that's how I felt. I saw that another booktuber did a vlog on this book, and she didn't like it either, so I feel less bad. It's not just me. The next book I'm going to talk about, I don't have a physical copy of, so I will put up a picture here on the side. This was, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. This book was, spoiler alert, I got it from the library. This story was about, let me check. So this is a story about Marcus, who is an actor on a famous like medieval TV show. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. It was like a show that's based on a book, but the show goes off the course of the book and things like that. So it has a lot of fandoms that like write their own versions of the stories, and there's like fans that write like steamy fanfics of it. One of those fans being this woman named April. So April has online friends for this fandom. One of the guys she's really close with, she hasn't met him in person. He goes obviously by an alias. Everybody goes by an alias online, but it ends up being the actor from that show, Marcus. He's not allowed to tell anyone because it'll break his contract. He's not supposed to talk bad about the show or anything, and obviously if he's rewriting parts of the story, that wouldn't go over very well for his contract. April, she's happens to be a plus size woman, and she's a little hesitant to put herself out there, but she's tired of like hiding from the world and really wants to express her love for the show and like the fandoms and the cosplay. So she posts a picture of her in a cosplay outfit that she created on Twitter, and it goes viral. There were terrible people like criticizing her for her weight. You know, there were people that were also supportive, but the guy Marcus, the actor, sees it and he comments on it and says, "I would be honored to go out on a date with you. You're beautiful. Like, fuck all these haters," basically. And people online are like, "Oh, you're just saying that," but he's like, "No, I really would." So he ends up taking her on a date for real. The thing is, he has this like exterior facade of himself that he uses to protect himself from like the media and stuff. So he comes off as very like airheaded and stupid and shallow. And he kind of uses that facade with her on the date, but she like digs a little deeper, and it's their relationship building into finding his true self and her getting to know the true version of him, and him realizing that she's the same woman that he's been talking to online. I mean, she confesses that she has she writes these steamy fanfics for the show, and when she reveals the username, he's like, "Oh my god, this is the woman I've been talking to online with for like 2-3 years, who's like my best friend online." But he doesn't tell her that because he's scared about the contract and what she will think. So he's hiding the secret from her and the complications that come of that. The love story is a fun ride. I enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And I just kept it short and sweet. I said enjoyable read, fun and thoughtful, felt for the characters. They really go also into like the fact that she's plus size and how she feels about that and how she can be insecure about that and how she overcomes her insecurities and to be confident in herself, and even like the pressure her parents put on her and the pressures that his parents put on him for feeling like he didn't accomplish enough. Like, sure, he's a successful actor, but like his parents are like very academic professors and stuff like that, and they criticize him too, and the relationships people have with their parents and the struggles in that, and like not necessarily needing to put up with that shit, you know? Fuck that shit. I enjoyed it. It was good. I would recommend it. And apparently there's a second one coming out in the series in 2021, so I added it to my want to read list, but I have no idea what it's about. So the second to last book I'm going to talk about in this video, thank God this is almost done, right? It's been so long, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I did a reading vlog just on this book, so I can link that up in the corner as well if you want to watch it and get more of my thoughts on it. But for now, I will be quite brief. So this is a story of a French woman named Addie who lived in like the 1700s. She ends up selling her soul to a dark god by accident, kind of, and wishes for freedom and to live forever. But there's a catch, and he tricks her into this after she accepts the deal, is that no one will remember her. So literally after she is out of sight, she is forgotten. It's quite sad. This story took me a little while to get through. I will say it took me about a month to read. I just wasn't picking it up, and that's only because people say this book is really sad, and I really, really wanted to love it because it's been 5 stars for a lot of people. So I was just really hesitant to, I just had too many expectations. But once I got down to reading it, I basically read the majority of it within like 3 days. But anyway, a lot of this is about Addie's life and her struggles with this curse, and how she's basically homeless because how is she going to be able to stay in a hotel when once the mistress of the house closes the door, she forgets that she put her in that room, and then when she comes back expecting an empty room, there's this girl in there, and she's like, what the fuck are you doing here? Get out, you know? And things like that, and like her struggles to find happiness and love and meaning in life, and not wanting to give up her soul to this darkness guy, because the deal is that she can live forever, but he can have her soul when she's basically tired of it, you know, and just tired of living this struggle of an existence. But the twist in this story is that one day in 2014, she comes across a man that sees her and then remembers her. And no one has ever remembered her before. And that relationship and how she learns to start being a person almost, because she's just never, I don't know, she's never had that before. And it goes into that guy's point of view also in the story, like a fair amount, which I was not expecting when I first picked this up. I thought it would just be all about Addie. I mean, her name's on the cover, but it talks about that guy a lot as well. I forget what his name is. He's got like a basic ass name. I think I wrote it in my review. But yeah, I'm not gonna talk too much about this book because I did do a vlog on it. If you wanna know more of my thoughts and my experience reading it and the ups and downs and the shocking twists and things that I was not expecting, and definitely watch the vlog. Just another quick thought. Oh, I think I wrote it in my review, but another quick thought that I thought was really, really interesting that I wasn't expecting is her history with this darkness god character. He checks in on her every year in the beginning to be like, hey, have you given up yet? Like, give me your soul, whatever. And how he plays games with her and how she combats that, and how her history and kind of relationship with this guy unfolds, and how they battle each other and how they interact with each other throughout these 300 years of her being under this curse. I wasn't expecting that, but it was very interesting. And then also her story with the guy that remembers her and that love story. I don't want to spoil too much. But yeah, again, people say it makes you cry. I only shed a couple of tears at one thing, which I mentioned in my review, which I will read now. So I gave this 5 stars. I wrote in my review, a beautiful and complicated story. Addie's history with the darkness was very interesting. Addie is way stronger and more determined to find happiness in her life than I ever could be in that situation. She is a force of nature. She is resilient. I felt for the characters strongly, but only ended up with tears in my eyes once at the part where the love interest said what the rain made him think of first, and it was so hopeful. If you know what that means, you know what that means. If you don't, you have to read the book and watch my vlog. That's all I'm gonna say about this. Okay, this is the last book I read in fall. The end of fall is December 21st. Today is December 22nd. So that worked out good for this video. This is a story of a woman and a man who locked eyes on a bus and at a bus stop, and how they had this instant like love connection, but they couldn't find each other again. So this woman, she was looking for this guy who she was like, oh, he's the love of my life. She was looking for him with her friend for like a year, but couldn't find him. And then one day her friend comes to her and says, hey, I just met this guy, like I really like him, we're going out now, he's my boyfriend, I really want you to meet him and for you to love him. And obviously this is a guy that I think I'm gonna marry and all this stuff. Her friend and her like live together, they're best friends, like sisters basically. And when she brings the guy home for her to meet, our main lead to meet, it ends up being that guy from the bus. It gets kind of complicated. Basically, I mean, a lot of this book is, it's like over like 10-year span. So a lot of this book is like her struggle with not having that guy that she loves, and then also her trying to move on from him, and then him trying to be with the best friend, and then him having this weird connection with the girl that he remembers from the bus stop. It's not like he didn't remember. This complicated history that unfolds over 10 years. The author of this also wrote The Two Lives of Lydia Bird, which I talked about in another video, which I can also link if you want to see. But I ended up not liking that book as much because, I mean, it was okay. I mean, the story was okay, but it was just like not very romantic. And same thing with this. It's not like the most romance heavy. Like, sure, it's about her struggles with love and things like that, but it's not. The characters that are meant to be together, literally in both books, don't get together. And this is a little spoilery. Don't get together until the very end of the book. The end! So it's like I guess you could call it a slow burn. I'm not a slow burn reader. I want it to be the whole journey of them being together and their ups and downs of being together. This is the struggle of them being apart, and then at the end, when they get together, the author is like, okay, the end. As if like a romance is just, oh, we're finally together, that's it. I'm not personally about that, so that was a bit disappointing. I mean, the story is complex. I read this in like 2 days. I read this in under 24 hours actually, because it's motivating to read, because I just love love. So like, I just wanted them to be together so bad, but because they didn't get together until the very end, I just read it in under 24 hours. That's all that needs to be said about this book, honestly. Let me tell you what I wrote about it. Okay, so I ended up giving this book 3 stars, because I didn't like hate it. So in my review, I wrote, this author likes to make you wait till the capital letters very last page. A major slow burn, and I'm not a slow burn gal. I'm a lighted up kind of love story craver. If I was gonna unhaul a couple of books, I'd probably unhaul this author's 2 books that I have, just because I don't feel the need to read them again. And that is the last book I read this fall. So here are all the books minus the 1 library book that I read this fall. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that it was probably really long. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe if you're not already. Again, you can push the bell icon if you want to be notified every time that I post. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.